The Madlanga Commission, tasked with probing allegations of alleged infiltration in the criminal justice system by sophisticated organised crime syndicates, continues with Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Kunazi on the stand. Now, let's bring in political analyst Dr. Ralph Mateja and Ian Cameron, National Assembly Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Police, representing the DA in Parliament. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. And let me just start with you, Ralph, looking at what happened yesterday. So the Commission getting off to a start heavy on, I would say, the symbolism, heavy on the foundation laying. And what did you make of how things transpired yesterday?
Thank you, Sakina, and good morning to your viewers and Honorable Cameron. It's a great pleasure to be talking to you. I think that it got off to a very heated start, a very fast start. Not much time actually was spent on procedure. General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi came out as someone who just wanted to lay it out there. I mean, he mentioned his qualification, how he came about within the force, and started to explain some procedure. But very quickly in it already went into why are we having this commission? Allegations of impropriety and political interference that is rooted and has been circling around the controversial political task team unit within the SAPS. He explained about those dockets. So it looks as if he's a man who is about ready to get even into more nitty-gritties. And you could see, I think, the speaking of a police officer there, someone who is accustomed to putting evidence to what they say. So I think we should expect more today, but it's been off to a heated start, no dilly-dallying around details, Sakina.
And of course, Ian, we already, as Ralph says, we got into the nitty-gritty of it rather speedily, and as such we saw the general highlighting systemic failures within the SAPS leadership and accountability. Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi also mentioning you in that testimony yesterday, reaching out to the minister and also the president, and just talk to us about that interaction between you and also your impressions of what has come out so far.
Well, I think we saw General Kunazi as we've gotten to know him over the years. There was no playing around. He really spoke very, very directly. He didn't hold back whatsoever. And the fact that he kept on saying that anything that was asked, he kept on saying, but there is evidence. We'll bring evidence. It might need to be in camera, but there's evidence. So I mean, this takes it to a next level. Compared to a press briefing. Nevertheless, I mean, just back to the conversation between us, the first invitation was slightly different. It was actually already after Police Day in January regarding a smear campaign that he claimed to be against him during National Police Day. But then later on, as he correctly said, he called and asked whether we could have this conversation in the Portfolio Committee, which we did. We actually ended up having two sessions that basically touched on parts of it. And I think what worries me about it is if we look back and you go and watch those sessions again, that the minister plainly denied it was the whole issue specifically regarding Brown Mokotsi. But then also that the National Commissioner didn't say much. And one would have expected that he would have also gone to the president, possibly, as General Kunazi indicated yesterday, to say, but hey, there's a problem here. There's significant interference in our operational matters. So, yeah, a lot to still work through.
And to that point, in terms of oversight of the committee and, basically, if Mkhwanazi's calls were ignored in reaching out to, say, the minister, to the president in terms of what was going on, and if this is what forced his hand to actually call that press briefing, what does that say then about the mechanisms that are currently in place, Ian?
Well, obviously, I mean, things weren't working as they should have. The command structure in the South African Police Service, and this happened quite a few years ago. I think when Fikile Mbalula was the Minister of Police, there were changes made with regards to senior appointments that the minister had to approve them. And I think that was one part that immediately opened the door for significant political influence in the South African Police Service senior structure. And eventually it starts blurring the lines between what is operational and what is policy. He touched on this yesterday as well. With regards to us, I mean, we took it very seriously. It was almost immediate that the invitation was done. We literally changed the schedule to bring them to the committee. It just astounds me that things went quite quiet between all of them. And what was very interesting is they were, and we'll probably see this throughout the commission, but there were very pointed questions from one or two specific members of parliament as well, with regards to the whole political killing task team issue. It was almost as though there was a political agenda being driven from certain individuals. Nevertheless, when the commission was called, the way that there was almost a message made when the night that it was introduced or announced, as though we didn't know about anything. It was simply not true. Everything had been communicated. We had even published press releases about it, saying that this is what we're looking at. There is a significant problem. There were several meetings about the political killing task team that the minister had. There was speculation that the minister had sacked the head of crime intelligence. It's also head of the political killing task team, which eventually came out wasn't true. There was a lot of confusion, and the executive was kind of missing in ensuring that it's communicated properly and that there was order again. It was just kind of left out to hang and dry.
And Ralph, I'd like your take on that as well. The whole issue of oversight, also, as Ian points out, the executive and what they knew or did not know, and what they did about what they supposedly would have known about. What's your take on all of that?
I mean, Sakina, I'm already seeing two strands or paths coming out of this commission. The first, there are certain things that are quite basic, should have been done around impropriety. Those things might not depend largely on the findings. I mean, if it was clear that there's been interference in terms of obstruction that just borders on criminality, consequences ought to be meted without relying on the discretion of the executive as to what do they do with the findings. But speaking to what Ian has just said about the accountability structure that exists, those are issues that I think need to be looked at also from a policy point of view. I mean, as I'm looking at this, within the South African police services, we can already talk about the concentration of authority in one place in a way that one can say undermine the institution. This is the reason why we are where we are. How is the accountability structure within the SAPS? Is there any devolution of that responsibility in a way that the system does not have what you can call a single point failure, whereby if there is a transgression or failure in one place, the entire system caves in? We need to be thinking about independence. And I think we have been here before. There's been discussions around the role of the IPID. You are going back to that discussion we have had around the Scorpions. That is about the independence within the police or the security cluster. How that policy, or how we need to take a policy decision to reconfigure this accountability structure to make sure we are not where we are again. And I think that, for me, it's about policy. It's about what are we going to do about these findings? Are we going to change that policy in a way that we have a more rigid accountability structure that is not malleable or susceptible to this kind of intervention, Sakina?
And I want to follow up on that point because, Ian, this predates, your entry into the parliamentary setup. But we are listening now to Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi making these very serious allegations about what is going on in the South African police service and the criminal justice system overall. Just to quote some of what he said yesterday, and he said, and I quote, "I want to demonstrate that the criminal justice system has been subjected to a continuous threat as well as sabotage. And we believe there is a real risk of total collapse if nothing is done," unquote. So, end quotes rather. So this, for me, is quite critical one in terms of just outlining how serious the issue is. But one has to question why we've even gotten to this point, because these stories of what is going on, political interference and otherwise in the matters of the police service is not new. I remember watching, and this is probably easily a decade ago, a portfolio committee on police briefing in Parliament, where they were talking about turf wars between IPID and members of the South African Police Service at OR Tambo International Airport over drugs, where they were talking about a police, someone who was supposed to be in prison, who was actually leading a police department, someone who was supposed to be in prison. These things seem incredulous, but they've been a long time coming. So no surprise then that we are probably on the brink of collapse here, Ian.
Well, I think, and this is where the executive, and I'm specifically going to park part of this in front of the office of the president, regardless of who it is. You know, for the past months, we have been questioning criminal figures in the South African Police Service. We've exposed in the past week, through a question from a member in the NCOP, that a total of 57 South African Police Service members that were sanctioned for dismissal because of, amongst other things, rape, murder, corruption, armed robbery, assault, GBH, etc., were those sanctions were turned around by the provincial commissioner in the Western Cape, and they were allowed to stay in the South African Police Service. Some of them just got a final written warning, others got a month's worth of unpaid suspension. But the point is that we're allowing criminals back in our ranks. And I mean, you speak of that turf war, you're spot on, and that hasn't changed. So the point that there's a so-called commission to figure out what's happening, it's good that there's a commission. But we've known these things for a very, very long time. We keep saying it. Yesterday, I questioned the Minister of Police about Babita Deokaran's assassination. Even with that, they still say, no, the Hawks are doing their best. How is it possible that a journalist, say, for example, you on the SABC, you've identified these things. You know a lot of details. Jeff Wicks wrote about it in the Shadow State. But the Hawks say it's taken them 4 years and they haven't even arrested the kingpins. You know what I mean? So yeah, eventually the executive needs to take responsibility. I can't interfere in operational matters. I keep calling people to come to the committee. My members in the committee do the same thing. But eventually the executive needs to act. And it's just a shameless stumbling on instead of taking action against their own people.
And Ralph, coming in there, the South African public has commission fatigue at this point because they don't believe that much comes out of it ultimately. But as Ian says, there has to be action, there has to be accountability, and that seems to be sorely lacking. So just in terms of the pushback that we expect to see, even if it is, fault lines of institutional resistance at this point to what is emerging, what's your take on that?
I mean, Sakina, if you have senior police officials desperate to a point where someone has to call a press conference and talk about their colleagues in this way, I cannot imagine what else amount to a crisis. I do think that this is a moment where we have to reflect deeply, and we have to go far back, Sakina. It's not just about what has happened recently. As you correctly say, this is the story that goes far back. South Africa has a history of losing senior police officials, commissioners for that matter. They have left office under cloudy circumstances, controversial circumstances, because of a not so clear system or a not so rigorous system of accountability. So this is not a moment where one can say the commission need to be used to sweep things under the carpet. I also don't think this commission will author its finding in a way that allows the president a discretion to walk away from responsibility out of this. I mean, commissions are also evolving, Sakina. We have seen them before, and the commissioners also do not just want to sit there and come up with recommendations that leave so much discretion for the executive to walk away from that. So I'm very hopeful that we just might be up for maybe a tightly knit kind of findings by the commission in a way that does not give much discretion for the president to walk away from their responsibility. And again, Sakina, we have evolved as a country. I do think there are those that are going to go to court and say to the president that you are not exercising your discretion in a reasonable way if you avoid implementing some of the findings of this commission. So I think that is the pushback. NGOs will go to court. to sue for the implementation of these things, Sakina.
And Ian, just finally, there's also questions of multiple processes taking place at the same time and the potential risk that may pose. What are you doing to avoid potential conflicts in your approach, especially from Parliament?
So, I mean, I can't speak on behalf of the whole ad hoc committee, but it is going to be difficult. The ad hoc committee, I think, had an opportunity that was unfortunately missed by not getting started quickly enough. There were significant delays, very, very unnecessary delays. It is now the 18th of September. We still haven't really started. It's extremely frustrating, and it's going to be difficult to balance that. Regardless, I think that it can play a role, especially with regards to the oversight function of Parliament. This is now a focused process. We don't have to, like the police committee, focus on 5 different departments and a whole lot of other things. It is focused specifically on this. My fear is that they would have to change the terms of reference and likely change the deadline for it, which is going to be a whole debate on its own. But yeah, I think unfortunately opportunity missed. We'll have to see if it's going to be worthwhile.
And final one to you, Ralph. What do you believe could potentially be the biggest single risk here, whether it be political, institutional or otherwise? What is the biggest risk to this commission?
Well, the biggest risk, Sakina, it's if there is too much discretion being left as to what to do. This is something happening within the security cluster. I don't want to say other portfolios are important, but it is very much critical. I mean, it has got to do with national security. So I think that this commission needs support, and I think processes that are underway in Parliament should not detract the work of the commission. Parliament has had opportunities for a long time to ask some of these questions, and as Mr. Cameron has stated, some members of Parliament, they've known about some of the allegations before. So I think this thing of parallel systems that are in place, institutions working in parallel, it should not be used to take attention away from the work of the commission, Sakina. If all of this is happening in good spirit, they should work in unison. Parliament should not whitewash this thing. It's not a clearinghouse. It's supposed to be an accountability house.
Well, thanks so much, gentlemen. Appreciate your inputs this morning. Dr. Ralph Matekga, political analyst, Ian Cameron, Chairperson of Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Police, their views on day 1 of the Madlanga Commission.